Hello and welcome back to the 5th episode of Let's Dev. I'm Adam from ACG on itch.io, link in the description. And we're going to continue modeling the pilot's pod of the racing ship that we were building in episode 4. Just got to get the front half done. And to get started, let's just get everything lined up. I think I want this double torus right at the world origin. So when we put the armature in, it will be really easy to just get everything lined up right in the center of that, and it won't look kind of weird when we have everything pivot around, because the pivot will be right at the center of this torus, and that's just what we want. There we go. Been holding off. I'm going to eventually merge all of this geometry into just one piece. Although I'll be merging all of the geometry into just one object. Because it'll be, well, in Maya anyway, it's easier to rig a mesh if it's all one object. I don't know if that works the same in Blender, but I always try to avoid needing to backtrack if I can, so I'm going to probably just do it because it's the practice I'm familiar with, and then if it doesn't work, I'll reassess. I'll learn how I need to do it for Blender. But now we've got that all lined up right at the world origin there. And we need a little pilot pod. Pilot pod with a couple of little wings because I want some directional. This is going to be the racer that's designed for a balance between top speed and maneuverability. So I want it to have a really good control fin on the back. The engines are part of the control fin, so it's got some engine gimbal to help with the control. Theoretically, it's not like this would actually work as a racing ship, in physics as we understand it, but it's a sci-fi game, so that's okay. And then engine gimbal at the front as well to provide additional control. But they're going to be much smaller. I'm going to scale them down. Kind of like this. And it'll hopefully all... Well, I do want these to be at... no, I don't want it to be in between. I just want it to be at 2 meters from the center line. Somewhere around there. I don't know. We'll get it all lined up once the pilot pod. But that's the goal for this is to have a pod that the pilot can set in with some small wings that will extend out and attach to these. And we can use those in the animation for additional control animations that just make it look like it's a really fast but maneuverable craft. Okay, let's jump right in then. Gonna start with a cube again. I don't always like to start with cubes for aerodynamic vehicles. Because it's not the most aerodynamic shape, but it does keep it pretty easy to get kind of the block out done with a very low poly object, and then with some beveling and some smoothing and just cutting in extra edge loops, it's still, you can get a cube to look pretty rounded and aerodynamic by the end product. That's what I'm going to try and do here. That kind of set up right where I want it. Yeah, somewhere around there. Gonna learn from the mistakes we made in the last video. Make sure to do these inset faces. Yeah, inset faces first, and then we'll cut it in half and run the mirror modifier. We don't have to worry about manually merging all of those vertexes up the seam at the end. Well, we might, but we won't have to adjust the distance so much. It should be all within 1/1000th or 1/millionth of a millimeter, because they will all propagate right along the y-axis at the 0 line. But we need this cockpit. And I want it to follow this edge. So I'm going to use the edge slide. Slide that up. Slide this one down. It's all still lined up with the geometry. Maybe a little further down. And we can extrude that. Scale it down a little bit. Just bump it back, and we've got a pretty decent looking canopy coming together. This is more or less the way all of them have been done. So maybe not the most visually interesting thing I could do as an artist, but at least it'll have some consistency. And I know it will work, so that's always a plus. And I guess while we're here, might as well go ahead and like to give these some geometry to just kind of really sell that it's got support structure for the glass part of the canopy. Put some little struts that we can texture like metal in between the glass. Let me see. Just a touch. And just scale on the X. Maybe just bump that down a little bit. It's really, on the front of the ship, things aren't going to get too much scrutiny, but still want it to look as nice as I can. Let's have a look here. Yeah, that's all looking pretty good. Pull this up just a touch. And just a little bit of an angle, maybe put an air intake up here at the front. The game is called Star Racing, but so far all of the tracks are located on the surface of planets that we can assume might have atmosphere, and therefore an air intake is technically justified, which is the best kind of justified. Want this to maybe taper in just a little bit towards the bottom. And I need to really cut this in half soon and start my symmetry, because it'll make it easier to texture in the style that I've been going with for everything else. But just round this out a little bit more. And no, I'm gonna wait to bevel things. I might be making a risky decision here, but I'm gonna wait to bevel things until after running the mirror modifier, because I want to get these wings in, and it's just so much easier to do that in symmetry. So we're just going to do like last time and grab half of the. Oop, I was worried I might have. Sure to turn off your loop cut tool before you go to try and grab the geometry, because you might cut extra edge loops in that you don't need. Then you'll have to press Control Z a couple of times. So speaking of Control Z and being able to go back to specific points, always a good time to increment and save. Can always delete the files later once everything's finalized and how you want it. This time I'm just going to mirror across the x-axis. We'll take up a little more space on our UV sheet, but it will allow us to have different, because the geometry isn't technically symmetrical across the z-axis anymore. There's a cockpit on top, there's a downward slant to the bottom. Wouldn't even qualify as a symmetrical mesh on this one. Okay, I might do something on the back of this mesh, but I can do that later. But these are actually looking a little bit too big to me. Scale this down to more about 0.4. So I really don't want these to come off as speed boost engines. It's more for control. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Just inset some faces right here. Pull that out a little bit. actually pull that out a little bit more than that, I think. Let's scale that down. We're going to have to sweep these forward somewhat aggressively if I want to keep the engines there. And I do want it to sweep forward. I'm pretty sure of that much. How aggressively, I don't know. I haven't decided yet. Now let's maybe scoot this forward. And you know, maybe I need another edge loop right in there. Take this back a little bit. All right. Maybe something kind of like this. And another edge loop. Not too bad. Just smooth this all out a little bit. I think I might move these out 1 more meter. And let's kind of extrude this. make it kind of a narrow pivot point where it won't look super weird when this engine's gimbaling all around. A broad wing edge would make more sense to have a ball joint connection or something, which I'm not going to bother actually modeling. You totally could, but for this game and the view it's going to be in, I just kind of feel like I don't necessarily need to mess with all of that detail as of yet. Maybe if it does well and I start putting together a team, an art team, that'll change. But for right now, I just want a prototype, and I just want it to be a pretty prototype. Put that right on the middle of the engine geometry. An important thing to do when you're overlapping meshes, just go ahead and delete those faces that are completely inside of another mesh. There's no reason to render that. Well, there we go. Not too shabby. Do want a lot more shape to this wing though, so we are going to need to bevel these sides and then remove the n-gons. Tempted to put in an extra segment, but it really is not the most important piece of geometry in the game. I could smooth it out more with an extra segment in there and really get it looking like a rounded wing edge. But no. Actually, I might not bevel this at all. This might be a good time to just run a smooth subdivision on all of this mesh. No, it doesn't look like there's enough information there yet for it to be able to smooth sometimes that creates a lot of unnecessary geometry that I don't even know if it was worth running the operation. Can be a pretty quick way to make some geometry look a lot more smooth and rounded without having to start at a crazy high poly. I just find it harder to work at super high resolution for the block out. I like to block it out low poly and smooth it down and refine it from there. Anyway, back to the drawing board. Let's get those same edges one more time. And bevel this in. Then before we apply the mirror modifier, go ahead and just merge these vertices. That way we only have to do it on one side. Saves us a little bit of work. Let's see where else we can get these bevels worked in, because I do think we're just gonna kind of do this manually. You know, I know what I can do here. I think. Did that create interior faces? Ah, it did. Mm -mm. Yeah, no, I don't want to mess with all that deleting interior faces. I thought it would auto merge, but no such luck. Uh, well, what can you do, I suppose? Sometimes you just got to apply a modifier and deal with the consequences. Um, let's make sure I am. Oops. Okay. Just not trusting that this is merging on its own, but should be so close. But we won't even have to adjust the distance. Oh, okay. Yeah, those are merged up. Good to go. I want to take this whole thing, move it forward just a bit. And extrude this region. Scale that down. I guess inset faces. Extrude it back out a little bit. Back into the geometry, I suppose. Rather. There we go. And I'm actually thinking I didn't UV unwrap this yet. So I may actually cut this in half and run that mirror modifier again just for the UV unwrapping. Though I also want to maybe just scale this down a touch. Yeah. Yeah, maybe. Move these back in. And I'll like them closer into the front of the ship. Really, I might make the whole thing just a little bit smaller. You know what, once again, I'm gonna increment and save here, because I may not like this decision. I think it's time to go ahead and merge these into one item. And set the origin back to the center of mass of that new object. scale this down just a scooch. Like that, maybe 80% of its original size. I think I'll do the same with this. Would make that 70% of its original size. Bump this back up. And bump all of this back. Should make it a little closer. And I'm sure I'll have to adjust, but I'm basically using the same collider for all of the racers. And I don't mind them being a little bit different shapes and just using the same collider, but I don't want it to be anything wildly noticeable in the game. I'll shrink that down just a little bit. And maybe actually this direction too. That should work pretty well. Okay, back to the pilot seat. And though I know it feels wrong, just destroy half of your geometry again. If you're following along, I guess. I don't know if anybody's... If you're making your own model somewhere out there in the world, you want to do a mirror modifier, just, go ahead and cut your geometry in half. Then mirror it back. Now we should be able to do that bevel. All the way around. Much easier. Looks like that all cut in very smoothly. I'm very pleased to say. It's looking a little sharp to me up here, though. Cut in a edge loop there. raise this up a little bit. Maybe push this down a little bit. That edge wouldn't have beveled smoothly because of the tries that we cut into the wing earlier. If you're wondering why I didn't just bevel here. And there we go. Now we can start working on the UV sheet, although I do want to shade that smooth, then run my edge split modifier on it, because that's it's just how I want the shading to look, I suppose. Let's see if we can get a little. I'm about to call this video done, but I am going to see if I can get a little bit of the UV sheet unwrapped. Alrighty. Get this cockpit canopy. Select it out. Make sure I've got all of it. For just a second here. We can unwrap that. Oh, did I not have all of it? I didn't have all of it. Grab all of this. And all of this. What was happening there? Feel like things got a little misaligned. Pull this back up here because I gotta make sure. Alright, just take it all the way back to the mirror modifier. smooth. Add an edge split. Then just select all. This stuff. This stuff. And all of that stuff. There we go. Now I got all of it. Okay. And let's see, I don't need wireframe. Just need that. And this over the top. Just make that into one island. I do kind of want this to be a little more lined up like this. Oop, darn it. For somebody that works with geometry as much as I do, I get my X and Y coordinates mixed up far too often. Alright, that looks pretty decent. Pixel density. Get these. As part of the side. I guess I'll take this kind of beveled edge too. I did on the front, so I might as well. There's that one. I guess while we're at it, because I might forget, I'll start here. That'll make the front. bottom side. People outside. Let's see. Wing surfaces. Let's see here. Wing edges. Wing edge number 1. And wing edge number 2. Now we've at least got all of the sections separated out. It looks like we actually do need this inside lip. Get those pluses on there. Just the checkerboard can still mean a 0-point face on the UV map that just runs up the length of the checkerboard. It's just really skinny like this, but if you see that plus, then you know it's an actual indicator of UV textile density. And I think that's where I'll go ahead and apply that. Run my little test to make sure everything merged together. My quick test, there's more accurate ones, but looks like everything's good. And we can start digging into the actual texturing in the next episode. So, hope you enjoyed, and I'll see y'all there.